Thanks for coming out tonight. You never know, because it's Selichot in the midst of a pandemic. Starting up. And now it's live. All right. So we are live. Rabbi Matt Berger here. Thanks so much for tuning in to the first part of our Selichot program. We've got a minyan here as well in the sanctuary. We're going to be showing an Israeli film. Came out and was shown at festivals in 2012. And it's a very interesting film called Sweet Sins. And they'll have English subtitles. You'll hear the audio of the Hebrew. It's about 23 minutes. And what's interesting about this film is it's basically an Orthodox family with a dad and Abba who's really struggling with his faith, but still keeps all of the commandments, not only because he was raised Orthodox, but also for the sake of his family. And the filmmaker who's doing the documentary is actually his daughter. And some of the revelations and discussions that they have as a father and daughter, filmmaker and dad, you'll see toward the end of the film will begin to affect the filmmaker herself. So without further ado, our tech crew should be starting the movie, and you should at home be seeing and hearing the movie. Away we go.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
אמן.
הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו מדליקים על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. מאמין באלוהים וכל הדברים האלה, אבל דווקא שבראש השנה שהוא עולה ושופט את כולם וזה, לא יודע, לא נראה לי כל העסק הזה.
אתה מפחד עכשיו שישפטו אותך על דברים רעים או טובים, או שאתה לא מפחד?
זה לא שחור ולבן. אני יכול להגיד לך על הסקאלה, בין 0 ל-100, כמה אני מפחד. להגיד? 5% אולי. כל היותר. אני מפחד. אם המראיינת לא מאמינה לי, אז זה של הבעיה. או שהיא לא מבינה את המורכבות של העניין, או שזה לא נעים שהמראיינת לא מאמינה לך, בייחוד שהיא הבת שלך. עדיף שאמא לא תשמע את זה. סתם, זה יצייר אותה, חבל.
כשהייתי בת 12 ונסענו לטיול בת מצווה בפריז, אבא הסתובב שם בלי כיפה. הוא פחד מאנטישמיות ועם כובע הוא אמר שחם לו. כשחזרנו הביתה וסידרתי אלבום גדול שכולו פריז, פתאום ממש התביישתי בחלק מהתמונות. הייתה תמונה אחת מאוד יפה מיורו דיסני, שממש רציתי להראות לחברות שלי. אז לקחתי ואת התמונה של אבא, ופשוט ציירתי לו כיפה על הראש.
שלום.
לא השתלט
שלום. שום דבר.
כמו שהיית כאן נשארת.
גם אתה, אותו דבר.
ברוך השם. בבקשה, שבו בבקשה. איפה שנוח לכם, יד השולחן, השולחן הקטן, השולחן הגדול, איפה שנוח לכם. את הגדולה בבית?
כן.
כן.
זאת אומרת, את עוד לא נשואה.
לא.
נו, אני מאחל לך שלך. בקרוב הנישואין?
כולם מאחלים לאיזה.
בסדר, גם אני ביניים מאחלים.
באיזה כיתה אתה לימדת אותו?
ט' וי'.
ט' וי', כן. אנחנו מקיימים אורח חיים דתי במשפחה, ברוך השם.
ברוך השם.
יחד עם זה, לי עצמי, לאורך לא מעט שנים, כל הזמן, יש הרבה התלבטויות, ואני ממשיך עם ההתלבטויות האלה. אני ממשיך באורח החיים הדתי, למרות כל ההתלבטויות האלה.
למי אין התלבטויות?
אני לא יודע, אני חושב שאולי לך אין התלבטויות.
מי אומר?
יש?
מי אומר? לכל אדם יש.
לכל אדם יש?
רגע של חולשה, קוראים לזה. רגעי חולשה.
אצלי הם הרבה, יש הרבה.
כן. זה כבר כל אחד ואחד לפי המצב שנמצא. אם רופא בא אל אדם ואומר לו, אדוני, אם תקיים את הדברים האלה ואלה ואלה ואלה, תהיה בריא, אחרי תהיה לך צרות צרורות, חס ושלום. אז מה יגיד הרופא לא טוב? הוא אומר משהו, הוא מדבר לך מה שצריך להיות. הוא אומר, זה יהיה.
כן.
אז מי אתה בא בטענות מי? אז הרופא לא טוב, זה הרופא טוב מאוד, הוא אמר לך כך שזה יהיה כך.
כן, אבל לעומת זאת, לא עלינו, אתה שומעים גם על אנשים צדיקים גמורים,
רגע אחד.
שקוראים להם דברים איומים ונוראים.
רגע, בסדר, אתה צודק 100%.
או מצד אחר, תינוק חלילה,
כן.
שלא, ברור שכשהוא יצא מרחם אמו הוא לא חטא ולא פשע.
ודאי.
והוא נולד לחיים איומים.
נכון, אתה צודק, זה קשה.
אז מה נענה על זה? אלה סוג השאלות שמטרידות אותי.
אז מה קורה כאן? כשבוא מדי פעם נותן מכה, הוא מחכה בתשובה, נותן מכה, ברחמים, הוא מכה ברחמים. ולהעמיק את השאלות יותר ויותר בלי פתרון זה לא טוב. צריכה להיות תשובה מוכנה בראש, אז בסדר, אפשר לשאול את השאלה, כי מוצאים לה מיד מוצאים תשובה. הבנים משאירים את השאלה בלי תשובה, זה מסוכן.
אם נגיד אבא אומר שהוא לא שלם עם עצמו, כאילו,
במה?
עם המסגרת בעיקר הדתית.
אבל הוא חושב שהוא... אני חושבת שאם תשאלי אותו, גם אם הוא היה הולך למסגרת אחרת, הוא גם לא היה שלם עם עצמו.
למה?
מה?
למה?
לא רק, אני חושבת שאין מסגרות שאתה לגמרי שלם עם עצמה. אבל אני חושבת שבן אדם שיש לו משפחה, זה בכל זאת לא רק העניין שלו, כמו שבדברים אחרים זה לא רק העניין שלו. גם בן אדם יכול להחליט שהוא לא רוצה לעבוד. אז מה אם יש לו משפחה? אז אני לא אפרנס אותה, מה יש? הוא רוצה לישון כל היום. אז אני חושבת שבן אדם שיש לו משפחה, יש לו אחריות בכל מיני תחומים, לא רק גם בעניין המסגרת החינוכית והדתית של המשפחה, גם בענייני פרנסה, גם בענייני מחויבות לילדים ולאישה. אפשר בלי זה, אבל אז מה?
מה הדבר שהכי מפחיד אותך שאבא יעשה?
הכי מפחיד?
כן. זאת אומרת שאת דואגת.
אני לא רוצה לחשוב, אני מדחיקה.
חולה על תל אביב. יש בה אקשן, יש בה חיים, יש בה יופי, יש בה בילויים, יש בה חטאים. אלוהים ברא גם את החטא.
למה?
נכון או לא?
מה...
נכון שאלוהים ברא גם את החטא?
מה אתה חושב?
מה את חושבת?
שכן? את האפשרות לחטא.
האפשרות לחטא?
נו, אז איזה חטאים היית רוצה לעשות?
יש חטאים טובים.
איזה חטאים היית רוצה לעשות שלא הספקת?
סתם, כל לא יפה להגיד, אבל כל האווירת עוללות הזאת, אני לפעמים קצת מתחבר אליה. חופשית כזאת, לא יודע.
מה?
לא יודע להסביר את זה. למה את מסמיקה? מה קורה? מה הסיבה?
הנה הילד הנוטי בוי.
מה זה נוטי בוי?
ילד השובב.
אמא אומרת שאין לה שליטה על מעשים של אנשים אחרים.
יש לה קצת.
שליטה אמרתי, יש לי שליטה בגבול מסוים.
יש לה קצת.
במה יש לה שליטה?
מה?
במה יש לה שליטה?
שכנועים ודיבורים.
לא פעמים, בזכותה אני הולך לבית הכנסת, שישי ושבת בבוקר. מפעילה עליי...
לחץ פיזי, לא פיזי, לחץ נתון.
עליי מנסה עידוד.
חי עם תיקון.
כשלא הולך לעידוד, כשהיא רואה שלא הולך, אז היא מתעצבנת, אז היא אומרת לי, זה לא בסדר.
מה אני אומרת?
שזה לא בסדר. וזה מעודד אותי לא ללכת גם בשבת שאחרי
נכון,
זה.
ואז אני צריכה לדעת שאני צריכה לא להגיד את הדברים האלה, כי אני רואה עם הנוטי בוי מה מותר להגיד לו ומה אסור להגיד לו.
בדיוק. בבוקר זה ככה, במקרה, בדרך כלל אני כבר נעצר פה, כי הרבה פעמים, במקרה הטוב, אני מגיע בשעה 9 בערך, ואז בדיוק הרב מדבר שמה, ואז לא נעים לי איך שאני נכנס שהוא יראה אותי ככה, עכשיו בא עם הטלית. אז מה אני עושה? אני נעמד פה, רואה? שם עליי את הטלית, כמובן אני גם מברך עליה. ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו להתעטף בציצית. מברך עליה. ואז אני מכניס פה את הטלית שלא יראו שעכשיו באתי. למרות שכולם יודעים מתי אני בא. ואז אני נכנס עם הטלית, אלק יעני כבר הייתי פה. לוקח סידור. אני לא מתבייש בשעה שאני בא, אבל בכל זאת להיכנס ככה מול הרב, לא צריך סתם לנקר עיניים.
תשעה באב, הצום הראשון שלי. קמתי בבוקר והבית היה שקט לגמרי. שכבתי במיטה, חלשה מהצום, כשפתאום שמעתי שקיות מרשרשות במטבח. התגנבתי בשקט, וראיתי את אבא מחטט במקרר ומוציא ממנו אוכל. עמדתי שם קפואה ובהיתי עד שפתאום הוא גילה אותי. המבטים שלנו נפגשו לרגע, ואני במהירות חזרתי למיטה. כמה דקות אחר כך, אבא כבר הסביר לי שהוא הפסיק את הצום כי הוא הרגיש רע. האמנתי לו, באמת, ואמרתי לו שזה בסדר, אבל מאותו הרגע כבר לא הצלחתי להירדם.
את מבולבלת יותר?
יותר מאשר אם היה לי הכל השקפת עולם אחת ברורה.
אני מצטער, אבל זה אני. אני לא יכול להיות מה שאני לא. את חושבת שהייתי צריך לא לבטא את הערעורים שלי בעניינים האלה?
לא יודע.
בסדר.
לא יודע.
נראה לי שאת הולכת לבכות תכף, לא? רק נדמה לי?
אני מתלבטת יחד איתך, לא יודע.
מתרגשת? את גם מסמיקה. מה את צוחקת? אני יושב מולך, אני רואה אותך. אולי כדאי שאני אראיין.
למה?
אני לא יודע. וזה הזמן לשאול אותך אם באמת הדברים האלה פגעו בחינוך שלך או בהכרה הדתית שלך.
זה בלבל אותי.
כן? מתי זה התחיל הבלבול?
באולפנה נראה לי.
כבר באולפנה?
שם זה היה בעיקר. רציתי להיות ילדה טובה ולעשות מה שאומרים לי, אבל אף פעם לא היה משהו אחד לעשות. כשהייתי בסדר לפי האולפנה והתחנכתי וקיבלתי ככה טוב את הקו שלהם, אז בבית אתה...
טוב, כי הם מגזימים.
במה הם מגזימים?
הם הרבה מהמון דברים.
מה למשל?
מה למשל? שאני לא יכול לבוא למסיבת סיום שלך. נו, מה? כל מיני חומרות, נו, מה, בחייך. את יודעת שהם מגזימים.
בסדר, תלוי במה.
בסדר, אז זכותי להגיד שהם מגזימים.
בסדר.
בסדר.
אבל אתה צריך לדעת שזה גם מבלבל. בסדר, לא ציפיתי שתגיד בדיוק כמוהם, אתה לא צריך להשוות את עצמך בדיוק לקו שלהם.
אבל בשורשי
אבל
הדברים...
גם יחסית לאמא, אתה לפעמים היא אמרה משהו אחד ואתה צחקת על זה. כל מיני דברים.
נכון, בסדר. עם שירלי אני כבר ידע להיזהר יותר. ברוך אתה ה' אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו על ביעור חמץ.
אמן.
נו, איפה זה, שירלי? נו. אללה, איפה זה?
מה מגלים?
לא, דווקא אחרי זה יש, אומרים כל חמירה וחמיה.
בסדר, נגיד אחרי זה.
ואחרי...
בסדר, נגיד אחרי זה, בואי נמצא כבר את הפירורים האלה.
ואתה צריך גם לבדוק בעוד מקומות.
איפה לבדוק?
אתה צריך לבדוק באמת שאין חמץ.
אבל אין לי כוח לשטויות האלה.
במדף יותר למעלה.
זה?
כן.
מה קרה שהתחלת לתת לי זה? כי נמאס לך גם? שמתי לב. כמה כבר יש לנו? רק 3? שנה זה קשה, לא אללה. תקשיבו, בשנה הבאה זה לא ייראה ככה, הטקס הזה. אנחנו נשדרג אותו. לא יודע איך, אבל זה לא יהיה ככה. אנחנו נפשט אותו, נפשיט אותו. נחשוב על משהו.
סלטן ויפיון אישות אביונים ישועה מתוך המלחמה פגע נפשם בעיקר דמם בעיניו ויחי וייתן לו מזל שואה ויתנהל בעדו תמיד כל היום יברכם יהי פוסף בארץ וראש הרים ירעש כלבנון פריו יבצית ומארץ כסף
עכשיו כשקראנו את הפסוקים של אותיות השם שלה, אז הפסוק של המם בהתחלה והמם בסוף, אני חושב שזה מאוד מאפיין גם אותה וגם את סבא. הפסוק הוא מה אהבתי תורתך כל היום משיחתי. סבתא וסבא הם היו אנשי עמל פשוטים שלא התעמקו מאוד ולא התעסקו עם כל מיני שאלות עמוקות, אבל האמונה היא הייתה בדמם.
שבע בבוקר לפני כמה חודשים, אמא מתקשרת להודיע שסבא שלי, אבא שלה, מאושפז במצב קריטי. אני עוזבת הכל, רצה לבית החולים, ועוד מספיקה לראות אותו מורדם ומונשם רגע לפני המוות. אני חוזרת הביתה נסערת. אבא עדיין מתנמנם שם, ונבהל פתאום לראות אותי ככה. הוא קם ומנסה להרגיע אותי, אבל הוא בעצמו נסער מאוד. כשאני קצת מתעשתת, אני שומעת את אבא שלי בקול רועד. הוא היה אדם כל כך צדיק. אני מרימה את העיניים, ובפעם הראשונה אני רואה את אבא שלי בוכה.
Go to the next slide just to cut off just hit one more ahead. There you go. All right, and are we back on the, great. All right, so I really like that movie. I think there are a lot of really interesting issues that probably many of us have, and I think as we approach the high holidays, I thought it would be interesting to have a short discussion on this. And in order for the people at home to at least hear you, I'm going to turn that mic on down there. If you want to answer a question or you have a question or a comment, just come up to the mic. If you're seen by the people watching at home, just step on this side of the mic. If you just want the audio to be, if you're on the other side of the mic, bring it like a foot away from the bima, and then no one will see you, but they'll still hear the audio. So the reason why I actually selected the movie was because of the first question that the daughter asked the dad, which was about the book of life and death and kind of what happens after we die, and the percent on a scale of 0% to 100% that the dad is afraid or thinking about these issues. So you obviously got that they were an Orthodox family living in Israel. So given that, and then given the dad's statement of 5%, what did you think of that? Were you surprised, kind of like you think it would be higher than that, like maybe more afraid of what could be happening later on, or you thought that was a solid answer for a standard Orthodox person? So I'm going to turn the mic on.
Well, I think he was questioning his faith, first of all. And I mean, he's going through the motions, but he really doesn't believe it. And I think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people question the existence of God, or they're agnostic about it. And he did it because it's his tradition. And I think tradition is important, but I mean, he really didn't care. I mean, he did it for his wife and his daughter. And he just questioned it, and he says, I'm going to do it, okay. So, I mean, I think a lot of Orthodox, I can't say that because I don't know, I'm not Orthodox. But I think a lot of people have that feeling, and they do it for tradition. So, and it's questioning faith, and that's a standard question that everybody has.
And I think it would be interesting to know whether or not he was in an arranged marriage, or if he chose, it's within Orthodoxy, there are a lot of different gradations, and which could be you have a shafan, the person who is the matchmaker, and it's approved dates from approved family that chaperone, like did he go that route? In which case, he kind of knew the religiosity, at least, of the type of person that he was eventually going to marry. Or did he go kind of on his own? Maybe he was more modern Orthodox, but not necessarily having the traditional shadchanut, the matchmaking there. Any other thoughts about the 5%? What comes to mind for me is the who shall live and who shall die, like by strangling and stoning and all these kind of really horrendous things, earthquakes, water infestation, things like that, which I grew up with, all of you grew up with in translation. Of course, it's in Hebrew, it's usually sung. And the newer form, High Holiday Prayer Book, treats it a little differently. They, of course, still have that as one of the 3 or 4 different translations, but at least when I selected and kind of chose what we were going to do as a congregation, I have some of the traditional, but then have some of the more, let's say, doubtful or questioning. But what's interesting is, and the next scene I think was the Hebrew school teacher, the guy from Cheder, which I don't know if this was like a separate religious school deal, or if he went to a religious high school. So in Israel, they have, all different levels of religious school, which is also secular. So his Hebrew instruction, his Judaic instruction, his mathematics, his learning Hebrew as a language, all of that could have been subsumed, and this was his guy's 9th and 10th grade teacher in at least one or more subjects. And what struck me at first was that he's like, well, everybody has doubts, you know. I have doubts, but then it seemed to maybe change a little bit as the conversation went on. So I don't know if any of you noticed that or felt kind of a palpable change. Like first it was like all embracing, like, you know, no problem, you know. Everyone has doubts. No one has 100% certainty. But it seemed to me he wouldn't have been maybe very pleased with the 5%. He would probably be looking for more of an 85 to 90, maybe 92%. Any thoughts on the guy from 9th and 10th grade? Were you surprised by that, or were you thinking this is par for the course?
I think age has a lot to do with the outlook of the individuals. I read an article not long ago which says that with age, the fear of death declines. That when one is getting close to death, he's not worried about it, and that makes me feel good, frankly, because I worry about it. But I think the whole question raised by this film goes back to the statement that we're made in God's image. And if this is the way we are, then this is the way God is too, or at least God's self-image includes the weaknesses that are part of human existence. I think it asks questions without answering them, this film. And I think that's one of its strengths. It doesn't answer them. It's like the prayer book itself. It doesn't answer all the questions. That's what we're here for. That's why we do come.
I think those are, very, very astute comments. Any other thoughts about the 9th and 10th grade teacher? All right. I'm going to switch back to this. The next part of the film was the conversation that the filmmaker daughter was having with her mother, with the dad, the Abba, in the room at the same time, and it's centered around responsibility. And I thought this was a really interesting section, probably pretty eye-opening for the filmmaker daughter. And the mom, kind of the wife, to a certain extent laid down the gauntlet of what was going on. Like, look, it's all well and good if you want to have your doubts, but that's not going to excuse you from putting food on the table, nor is it going to give you a free pass when we're doing things as a family in a religious sense. So we're going to keep kosher at home. We're still going to look for the little breadcrumbs, even though the guy was so annoyed. And the younger daughter was actually really annoyed. She's like, genug, like let's have enough. What did you think about the wife's response to some of the doubt creeping in, or someone who's like very religiously scrupulous? In Hebrew, it's called midak dek. It's like you're very exacting in terms of following the rituals to a T, so to speak, where it certainly seemed like the father was less midak dek about it. He would be fine with a little looser interpretation of the rituals. And then a question that I have along with that is, if the shoe was on the other foot, so if the wife was the male in the relationship, and in the Orthodox world, only the men have to do time-bound mitzvot, with the exception, the one and only exception being Shabbat, and some people include Hanukkah, because that's at a specific time as well. But let's say the husband was the wife, and therefore one of the biggest time-bound commitments is thrice daily prayer. So that's why the guy's, doing his little shtickloch with the tallis bag, and, I don't want to be obnoxious when I go in and, be a Badinsky with the rabbi, but, I walk in all cool. I guess the question is, A, do you think the wife would have a similar opinion if she was on the other side? And then B, what did you think about how the wife interacted with her husband on this philosophical issue of what's called emunah, of faith? So I'm going to bring the mic around here. Yeah, hold on one second.
My question is, was the husband retired? Did he have a job? The wife was a traditional wife who stayed home and ironed, like she did there, or in Orthodoxy, and I don't know the dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, to me, certainly he looked like he was
retired.
I think he's probably still working, if I had to make a guess, and in all likelihood, like a traditional, meaning Orthodox Jewish household, like many of them at least, the wife was primarily staying at home. I mean, we don't know exactly where they lived and what particular neighborhood. If you're in an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, actually many times it's the wife who actually works, because the men are doing mandatory Torah study, and that you wouldn't want to get away from the Torah study because that would be considered wasting time.
So do you think it was a matriarchal house or a patriarchal house?
In that house,
Matriarch. I would think it's
probably more matriarchal, I would say, because I think she either had conversations with her husband in the past and knew about these doubts, and then was still saying, that's great that you have these doubts, but you have to think about more people than yourself. Meaning it's not just about you and your faith and your doubts, which are all well and good, although I think the wife would say not so good. But because now you have daughters and you're a role model to them, and you have responsibilities as my husband, and part of those responsibilities would be modeling good Orthodox Jewish behavior and following the rituals, to the maximum extent.
I think she made him do it, so.
Yeah. I'm going to pass it over.
One thing that struck me was the humor. He is almost like a kid, kind of teasing them a little bit. And even the wife, she may not agree with what he's thinking, but she doesn't put him down in a bad way. She tries to do it with some humor. Mm-hmm. So I see sort of some strength within the relationship that they can deal with some pretty serious topics with humor.
And she called him at one point like a naughty boy.
Mm-hmm. And he does come across as the naughty boy.
Yeah.
And he almost likes that role. It's like sneaking into the synagogue late. And he knows, everybody knows he's late, but that's just who I am.
Because he's doing the commandment, he is there. He might not be there from start to finish, but in many circles of Judaism where it's more traditional, and the length of the service, especially if it's a Monday, Thursday, or Saturday, Shabbat, the Torah service is, let's face it, very long, 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes for the Torah service in and of itself, before the rabbi speaks, before any of the prayers before or after. He'll shave a little off the top, so to speak, and he doesn't have an issue with that.
Since I didn't speak when we talked about the beginning piece, personally, the whole thing about who shall live and who shall die, it never really sort of clicked with me until our daughter had some very serious health problems a little over 20 years ago. And right after that, it was High Holy Days, and that piece came up, and I was like, wow. And it has stayed with me ever since. You know, so sometimes your own personal experiences may have something to do with how you experience the religious services.
Yeah, and at different times in your life, you're going to approach the same exact prayer, which might not, you might have skimmed through one particular year, you know, but I can guarantee you that people who are living in, you know, Louisiana, Panhandle, Florida, like that region, you know, where the hurricane's going to hit, like on Sunday, so that brings it 3 days away from, you know, when they get that part, who by water, you know, that may have more resonance. What about the whole thing with sweet sins? And he did this, if you remember, he was at a cafe in Tel Aviv. So without a doubt, there are plenty of Datiim, religious people who live in Tel Aviv, but it's certainly much easier than, let's say, Jerusalem to, you know, let loose a little bit. So he goes to the cafe, he's taking his kippah off, which more than likely means probably when he's outside of his town, where he might be wearing the kippah all the time. I mean, I don't know. Some people, well, if you're Orthodox, you're wearing it all the time. There's really not just when you're studying or something like that. So, and who knows what he was eating. But it's quite possible that it was a non-kosher restaurant. Whereas if it was in Jerusalem, you have to go really far out of your way to get to a non-kosher restaurant. You have to know where they are. Whereas in Tel Aviv, still most everything is going to be kosher, but your percentage of finding a non-kosher establishment is a slightly higher percentage. So what were the sweet sins that he was talking about? Was it going to that cafe, you know, taking off the kippah, maybe because he was doing something that wasn't quite right? I don't know. Was he eating like a combo cheese and meat type of deal? Or were the sweet sins the licentiousness? So licentiousness, so that's basically you're not into strict specific rules regarding sexuality, or another definition of licentiousness is you're not into strict interpretations of, let's say in this case, Orthodox Judaism. You know, so there can be licentiousness that's not necessarily sexual in nature, but I think he, in all likelihood, might have been talking about the sexual licentiousness, probably both and or just that. So the question is, are these, it's interesting that he called it sweet sins. I don't know, what do you think of that?
Well, it could be that his wife doesn't want him eating sweets, and he's kind of sneaking sweets. So it may have not a lot to do with religion as much as the relationship, and he's clearly overweight, and his wife probably is worried about him and wishes he didn't eat as many sweets.
So that's another thing. So I originally, when I was looking at that, I'm like, okay, maybe he's in Tel Aviv. People are going to be dressed a little less modestly than maybe in, you know, a place like Bnei Brak, like an ultra-Orthodox, you know, suburb around Tel Aviv. You know, so maybe he's able to see more, you know, of the opposite sex. But it might have been, not knowing what he was actually eating, that he was eating something that just wouldn't be good for his body. In which case, it's sweet sins, and then that's a totally different way of looking at it. Yeah, so I'll bring it over.
He was certainly an interesting character, a barrel of contradictions. Going back to when he said, thank goodness he was Orthodox, but I found that very funny in context of everything else he said and did. Almost like he really wished he wasn't. I thought of the sweet sins and that moment as referring to just the freedom of not having to think about it, of not having to be constrained. You go about, you wear what you want, you go where you want, you eat what you want. Could have been any of those things. I didn't think of it sexually, but I did think, he referred to the freedom of it, and I just not having to think about every minute what is moral and what is not. That's how it struck me. What I found, I think, most interesting with regard to the whole film and the whole conversation was very interesting looking at him, and there were a lot of questions about the rest of his life, what his work was, how he met his wife, there's so many questions that come up in the mind, how all of this fits in. But what there never was, at least I got a sense of, was how all those things you do in the synagogue, all those things you eat, all those little rituals of looking for breadcrumbs and so forth, how they apply in the context of life. Is not the point of it all to be holy in some way, sacred in some way, and more insightful or more understanding, more compassionate, whatever it is you're seeking to do through all of those rituals, but just doing the steps, what is that achieving? So it's almost like he really didn't want to be bothered with all of this, but it was necessary in light of the life he had taken on. He was grateful for it because it gave him something to do or be or think about, and yet none of that seemed to be applied to any conversation in any context in terms of a sacred value. I found myself thinking, are there really people who, I guess there are a lot of people who just go there because that's what you do, because somebody said you do,
Absolutely.
or you grew up thinking you do. But as an adult man with a wife and a daughter who will soon be marrying herself, to not be thinking about it in any of that context of how it applies to life, I guess it fit with his saying, no, I'm not worried about.
Yeah.
Why be worried? Because none of it came up in that context. That was the big contradiction for me. And he was just a host of contradictions.
I'll give it to you. And then I'd want to talk, right before we wrap up, about the relationship between the dad and the daughter and the changes in the confusion within the daughter, because this was obviously a challenging project where I think at times she was probably saying, did I bite off more than I wanted to chew in this case? Because I think some of the dad's philosophies and approaches to Judaism and religion kind of took her off guard, but then also there was a little bit when she started talking about how she felt in high school, there were some commonalities there as well.
I sense that he really was reaching a stage in his life where he was saying, I've been doing this stuff religiously since I was a little boy. Does it make any difference other than that I missed some of the sweet sins? I missed some of the things that I might otherwise have done. And am I really better than the next guy for having done that? And that's the root of the question. That's one of the questions we ask ourselves at this time of the year. These are God's rules. How do they fit with my way of life? And have I met those rules in the way that I think God requires of me?
So what are we to make of the relationship between the dad and the daughter? In that last conversation that they had, the confusion that the daughter was feeling, that probably bubbled up again, the confusion that she was feeling while she was in high school, the religious high school, and that also bubbled up when her dad started sharing with her.
I think she was seeing exactly the same thing that he was seeing, that he's grappling with these things. She never expected it from him. She expected her father to live this life because that's what you do. And he's saying, you know, why?
I don't remember exactly when it was, but in the beginning they were talking about, well, why do babies come out sick and what the role of God in that, which is the age-old question that we've had for God knows how many years, that what is the role of God in all that, and does God control everything? Now, the orthodoxy, I guess, they do believe that God controls everything, but the question is, why do bad things happen to good people, or why, you know, that's the age-old question, and he didn't know the answer, and I don't think anybody does.
Absolutely. Those are definitely super challenging to try and unpack. But I think overall there was a closeness between the older daughter and the dad, and that scene with them kind of leaning against each other when they found out that his father had recently passed away. And they were most probably in the scene prior to that, before she was in the car going to the hospital, the daughter, they were visiting her grandmother's grave. We don't know what time of year it was, but this is traditionally the time, and especially also between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that people visit the graves of loved ones. There's also, of course, a Yizkor memorial service as part of Yom Kippur as well. But I think also for her, seeing her dad cry was something important for her. And, obviously, men in many cultures, America specifically, are usually not necessarily criers, because there's this whole macho, kind of stereotype that you're supposed to, fit into. And I think it's always very interesting, just having kids of my own, like when I would cry and kind of their reaction to it is also through the lens of they've watched enough TV and movies and stuff like that to see kind of cinematic depictions of people crying, and whether they're, young boys or young girls, or, older men or older women. And I think when they see true emotion from kids with their parents, it can be challenging for them. It can challenge them or their understanding of the emotionality of one of their parents. Or it can make them potentially feel a little bit afraid too, like, oh boy, like if one of my parents can actually break down, does that mean that they're not necessarily invincible, or like a superhero, or something like that. I just think this, I wanted to find about a 25-minute movie, and when I heard that 5%, I was definitely sold on it. So hopefully you liked it. It's about 8:53. We're going to take like maybe 10-minute break tops, and then we're going to start the Selichot Service of Forgiveness, all of which will be on the screens before you. And then for those here, I made a photostatic copy of the text as well. Not the entire prayer book, but just the few dozen pages that we're doing. So hang tight at home if you need to use a restroom here. And then in about 10 minutes, we'll start our Selichot service with Havdalah, service of separation. Yes, I think we will begin. So for those of you with the service booklet, Mishkan Halev, prayers for Selichot, our introduction is on 96 of the booklet, or right on the screen before you. In the Middle Ages, in the Jewish towns and villages of Europe, the Schulklopfer, this is a Yiddish version of the town crier, would make his rounds from house to house, pounding on doors with a wooden mallet to gather a minyan of 10 people for public prayer. But during the days of Selichot, the penitential prayers that precede Rosh Hashanah, always on a Saturday evening, the door knocking happened at midnight, and the mallet was shaped like a shofar, and the Schulklopfer would have a special message for everyone on his route, men, women, and children alike. Israel, holy folk, awake, arouse yourselves, and rise to the service of the Creator. Still aspiring to be holy folk, we rise tonight, as our ancestors did, to the service of our Creator. We are here not because of a knock at the door, but because at this season, our hearts begin to pound, an inner voice awakens us, and we feel summoned to this place of prayer and community. What does it mean for us, citizens of the 21st century, to serve our Creator? Are we conducting our lives in ways that are true to our highest values? Do we appreciate the gift of our lives? Or do we too often squander that most precious of gifts and fail to live with purpose and gratitude? We ask questions like these on the threshold of a new year as we turn to traditions that guide us through what's called Cheshbon HaNefesh, self-examination of the soul, and Teshuvah, self-reflection or returning to the right path. We're going to continue on page 100 with the Havdalah blessings. Pleasure to call up Anita Marks to first light the multi-wick Havdalah candle. And all three of these brachot or blessings are serving as reminders of Shabbat, the sweetness of Shabbat through the joy. Feel free to light whenever you'd like, which would be right now, yeah. The spices, the smells, the foods that we enjoy on Shabbat, and then light, which is always a positive symbol, and the intertwining of Shabbat, the holy day, and the rest of the week, which are not less holy, but just not as sanctified as Shabbat. So you'll find the three blessings for the wine, the spices, and the lights on page 100. La 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 ya la la ya la la ya la la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la la Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei puri hagafen borei puri hagafen ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la spices Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Besamim, Borei Milnei Besamim. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la ya la la ya la la ya for light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Borei meorei ha'esh. Borei meorei ha'esh. Hamavdil ben kodesh lohol, Atotenu im kol, Zareinu v'chasbenu yarbe akol, ve'akochavim v'layla, Shavuato, 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 a good week, a week of peace, may gladness reign, thank you so much, joy increase, a good week, a week of peace, may gladness reign and joy. A song for Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu the prophet. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Bimera ve'amenu, Yavo Eleinu, Imoshiach ben David, Imoshiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagilad. Toda Rabba, thank you so much, Anita, for helping us with the Klei Kodesh, the holy objects of Havdalah. Now we're going to enter into the Selichot service itself, now that we've said goodbye to Shabbat until next Friday. If you turn to page 104, you'll find the familiar words of Hashivenu, return again. Take us back, Adonai, let us come back to you, renew in our time the days of old.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai, Elecha, v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yaminu Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. to what you are. Return to where you are. Shuva, Shuva. Chodesh, Chodesh, Yaminu ki kedem.
Continue with a poem on 105, Last Sliver of the Moon, the waning crescent, small and slender, glowing in the east at the end of the journey. A curve of silver, barely there, that fades away with the dawn. Faintest light the eye can discern, like the soul within me barely there, waning and weary as the year winds down. At the end of the journey, the old moon flickers out, and darkness awaits the new. Now in the stillness, we can feel it being born. Remind us, the horizon will be bright again. The waxing crescent will rise. Heal our hearts, gather us in from the darkness. Restore the light within us. You'll find the words of Achat Sha'alti, part of Psalm 27, on page 108.
Achat Shelati me'et Adonai utavakesh. Achat Shelati me'et Adonai utavakesh. Shivti b'veit Adonai kol yimei chayai. Lachazot beinoam beinoam Adonai ulevacher b'chechalot. Lachazot beinoam beinoam Adonai ulevacher b'chechalot. Achat Shelati me'et Adonai utavakesh.
God is my light and my refuge secure. Whom shall I fear? God is the stronghold of my life. Of whom should I be afraid? Just one thing I have asked of God, only this do I seek, to dwell in God's house all the days of my life, to behold divine sweetness and beauty, and to gaze in delight at God's temple. There's a personal reflection on page 110. Be patient toward all that is unresolved in your heart. Try to love the questions themselves. Do not now seek the answers, which cannot be given because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live among some distant day into the answers. We'll continue on 113. We're taught that days are scrolls, write on them only what you want remembered. But we remember our weaknesses, and our days bear the mark of all that went wrong. On this night we have hope in the one who sustains us. Though we stumble and falter, you promise forgiveness. If we stray from the truth, you do not forsake us. If we sink to the depths, your mercy uplifts us. If our urges betray us, your compassion is endless. If we distance ourselves, you do not disdain us. If we abandon your teachings, still you embrace us. If we seek you sincerely, your presence surrounds us. If we pray from the heart, you listen with yours. Though we stumble and falter, we are blessed by your promise. Turn now to Ki Anu Amecha, We Are Your People, page 117.
כי אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו, אנו בניך ואתה אבינו, אנו נחתך ואתה גורלנו, אנו צונך ואתה רואינו, אנו כרמך ואתה נותרנו, אנו רתיך ואתה דודנו.
Continue on 118 with a reading called God's Fate, a poem by Yehuda Amichai. God's fate is now like the fate of trees and stones, sun and moon, in which we stopped believing when faith in God began. But God is obliged to stay with us, at least like the trees, at least like the stones, and like the sun, moon, and stars. Let's rise now as we open the ark, turning to the words of Adonai, Adonai, God's 13 attributes, and you'll notice the High Holiday whites are on each of the Torah scrolls. Adonai, Adonai, Elohim, v'rachanun, erech apayim, v'rav chesed ve'emet, notzer chesed la'alafim, nosei avon, v'fesha v'chata'a v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, God compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the 1000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. We'll turn to the words of Psalm 19 on page 123, Torah Adonai Timimah Mishivat Nafesh. The Torah of the Eternal is perfect, renewing the soul. The testimony of the Eternal is enduring, making the simple wise. The precepts of the Eternal are just, rejoicing the heart. The instruction of the Eternal, giving light to the eyes.
Shivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu.
Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew in our time the days of old. Feel free to be seated. The theme of the path to return found on page 124. Soul of eternity, my strength, my song, where will I find you? Your place is a mystery far away. But where will I not find you? Your glory fills the world. I sought your nearness, I called you with all my heart. When I went out to find you, I found you coming toward me. Breathless, I witnessed your power, and in holiness I gaze. Another beautiful poem by Yehuda Amichai. We'll continue with the Vidui, our confession on 127, first in English. As the days of awe near, we reach for the infinite. Mindful of our frailty, we seek the holy. Despite our mortality, we carry within us the Ancient of Days. Despite loneliness within, we sense that we belong to a single soul, a spirit that fills the entire universe. Let us find that universal spirit, a new source of strength and significance, more compassion, more generosity, more gratitude for life. Let our hearts be open to self-reckoning. May we grasp how vital to our lives is teshuvah, the path of return. On this night of forgiveness, we confess our wrongs, take account of our sins, failures of judgment, weakness of will. The hour is late, our need to be forgiven, profound. We'll continue on 128. Ashamnu, Bagadnu,
Gazalnu,
Dibarnu
Dofi,
Nofi, Evinu, Veir Shanu, Zadnu, Hamasnu,
Tafanu Sheker,
Yatsnura, Gizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Ashanu, Sararnu,
Kishinu Orem,
Rashanu,
Shichatnu,
Tiavnu,
Tainu,
Titanu, Continue on 130 with the prayer, Al Chet, ways we have wronged, harm we have caused. For these sins, O God, we ask forgiveness. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha be'ones uvratzon, the ways we have wronged you under duress and by choice. V'al Chet shechatanu lefanecha bezadon uvishgaga, the harm we have caused in your world deliberately and by mistake. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha begalui uvasater, the ways we have wronged you openly and secretly. V'al Chet shechatanu lefanecha beyodim uvlo yodim, the harm we have caused in your world consciously and unconsciously. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam, the ways we have wronged you by hating without cause. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha birchilut, the harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzarut ayin, the ways we have wronged you through a selfish or petty spirit. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'imutz halev, the harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts. Ve'al kulam Eloha slichot salach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonements. And a third selection from Yudah Amichai on page 132. I ask myself, who's listening to these words of confession? Magnificent ear of the universe, are you my personal confidant? Or am I just talking to myself? Then I got it. The question is a diversion to distract me from hearing who I really am. A song of forgiveness, God, hear our voice, Shema Kolenu, on 134.
Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema Kolenu, Shema, Shema Kolenu, Shema
Hear our call, Adonai, our God. Show us compassion. Accept our prayer with love and goodwill. Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew our days as in the past. Hear our words, Adonai. Understand our unspoken thoughts. May the speech of our mouth and our heart's quiet prayer be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and our... Do not cast us away from your presence or cut us off from your Holy Spirit. Do not cast us away when we are old. As our diminishes, do not forsake us. Don't forsake us, Adonai. Do not be far from us, our God. With hope, Adonai, we await you. Surely you, Adonai, our God, you. Take these moments for our own silent prayer. We'll listen to the words of Ritzeh.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu Me'amecha Yisrael U'tefilatan Me'hava Tamid avodat Yisrael Yisrael
Translation, Eternal our God, your people Israel yearns for your favor. Receive our prayer with acceptance. May you always desire our worship. Divine One, close to all who call upon you, bring your grace and presence near to those who serve you. Pour out your Spirit upon us. We'll turn now to page 138, a poem by Priscilla Stern, called Walk With Me Into the Woods. Walk with me into the woods, leave the edge of the forest behind. Come deep into the green until the shafts of sunlight are lost. Feel the stillness of the center. Walk with me to the top of the hill, leave the broad path behind. Up beyond where the trees grow, hear the quiet of the heights. Walk me into this new year, into its demands, into its joys, into the clamor of its unfolding. Walk alone, each of us on our own right path, with the echoes of the blasts of the shofar, with the stillness of the center, with the help of our God. We rise now for the words of Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, found on page 141, followed by the singing of the folk version of Avinu Malkeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu, Avinu Malkeinu, Almighty and merciful, hear our voice. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha, Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu ve'al Olalenu ve'tapenu. Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Dever ve'cherev ve'ra'av me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger. Avinu Malkeinu, Kale Kol Tsar u'mastin me'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror. Avinu Malkeinu, kotvenu b'sefer chayim tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived. Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh aleinu shana tova. Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Honenu v'Hanenu, ki ein banu masim, asay manu,
I'll ask all of us to remain standing as I invite our Baal Tekiah, Mark Silver, forward, who will be sounding the shofar with 3 strong notes. Tekiah, Tekiah, Tekiah Gedolah. So I'll say Yasher Koach to Mark. Wonderful, wonderful sounding of the shofar. You can feel free to be seated. Thank you so much. And before I wish you Shana Tova, many thanks to our soloist, Allison Rosoff, as well as our accompanist, Joy Katzen-Guthrie. And we'll conclude with our prayer for health and well-being. The mitzvah of protecting life. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al shmirot hanefesh. I hope this upcoming new year is a happy and a healthy one for all of you. And I wish you good night, and I'll see those of you at home, all of us will, on Friday evening. Thank you so much.